All right, I did my best to get a recording of me putting together these little guys, little headphone clips. I don't know what I'm doing, but I did my best to try to get step by step how I do it. With the exception of I already have a ton of little robots cut out, so I didn't show how I cut them out. But that's a whole nother thing. You guys can do your own robots. Hopefully it helps. We'll see. Okay. So, see how I do here. Oh. So I like using this instant glue because I have a whole bunch of these to do in a row. It just takes too long if I'm waiting for wood glue to dry. But if I'm doing one, wood glue is a lot nicer because you can adjust and make changes. I've done enough of these now, probably, I don't know, probably 400 or 500 of them, that I can kind of eyeball pretty much everything that I do. And even if it sticks off a little bit, like my shoulder is a little bit further back than the other one, from the front and from the side, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be perfect. This is 2mm leather. Like I said, I don't really measure anything. I just kind of guesstimate, and a lot of it is based on having done so many of them. So I'm letting that dry for a little while. The feet are the hardest part for me on these guys, so I only do them one at a time. I try to get them at a little bit of an angle. I think they look better splayed out than perfectly parallel. It's just a little bit more natural. And I try to keep the wood grain going the same kind of complementary direction, but it's not critical. I don't think anybody's ever decided based on whether the feet grain match or not. And then while that's drying, I kind of just check to see where I am. I'm a little bit short on the head, so I'm going to replace this with a longer piece before it dries. It's a little bit overlong, but I'd rather have it be overlong. And this leather that I bought this last time is not very consistent thickness. It varies quite a bit, so I'm a little bit disappointed in it, but it's good enough for this. Okay, while that's drying, I'm going to work on the headphones here. So what I do with them, I don't remember what I did with the headphones. Hang on. There they are. So I showed how to make these. These are just a little spool that I buy online in bulk, and I cut it in half and just kind of round the edges and drill little holes. And I put a couple of drops of super glue and make sure the hole is facing the top of the head. Give it about 4 or 5 seconds to, it's not dry, but it's enough so that I can flip it over now and do the opposite side. Same thing, make sure the hole is facing the top of the head. Does it have to be perfect? No. It just has to be facing towards the top. And then I make the band out of the same thing I make the neck out of, a little piece of leather. And again, this is just guesstimation. I kind of just hold it roughly with the bottom of the hole there. It doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be close. And then I put a drop of super glue where they meet on the inside of the headphone there, so this doesn't pull back out. All right, the head's done, the body's pretty much dry. So what I try to do is I try to get, oh, I don't know, I think this is 1/8 inch. I try to get a little bit less than that distance wise on the head. So that's a little bit too much, so I'm going to cut off about how much too much it was. That looks pretty close. Let me take a look at it. Yeah, that's a good amount. Now, because this isn't a tight fit, it's going to take a little while to set up. So normally I would set this one aside and work on another one for a bit. All right. So I've already put my logo on the bottom of this. And so what I'm doing here is just gluing them down. I had to do a little bit of figuring on where to place this so that when you pinch it, the head doesn't rip off or go too far. I know roughly how far I need it to go. And so I'm not sure what you'll have to do to make that work. I guess I wouldn't glue it down at first, but I basically found out if I line it up with this notch in the center, that basically turns out to be about the right distance of travel here. You know, you don't want so much distance that the head jams back. Anyway, that's what I figured out with this particular one. I need to drill, hang on. So apparently I finished all 3 of them and did all the clips on the back of them, and I forgot to hit record on the phone. So now I'm gonna have to do a whole nother one. So it's gonna take me a little while to sand and all that. I'll come back and record again. All right, hopefully this time I'm recording, because I did this all and forgot to hit record. So this is probably the most difficult part. I just glued the head on. I've been in a rush to try to get one more done so I could show this part, but doing the spring wire is probably the most difficult part, because you have to gauge how far the head moves with how far the clip moves. And what I found over trial and error is this line where the 2 notches are pretty much lines up with the distance that I want the head to travel. So with that in mind, I'm gonna go ahead and just put one of these together. So I might have made the neck a little bit long. It feels a little bit loose, but we're gonna go for it and see how it turns out. So I'm just gluing the little robot on there, and I like to have the back hang off a little bit for a couple of reasons. The main one is it gives me a place to bend the wire, and oh, the head just wants to fall off so bad. I'm gonna try to use some accelerator real quick and see if I can get this to stay. Okay. All right, so basically what I want to do is I want to attach the head to the bottom of the clip so that when you pull on the clip, the head goes back, and when you push on the clip, or when the spring returns on the clip, it pushes the head back forward. So first thing I need to do is drill a couple of holes. So I drill a couple of holes large enough to hold whatever wire gauge you're using. And it's important that this one's more or less in the center of the back of the head. And it doesn't matter up and down where you put it, but I like to put it at the bottom edge. And then there's two things about this. I just estimate, because I've done enough of them, but I go a little bit more than a 90 degree with the top one so that the head can kind of point down in the natural angle that it wants to point. And part of that is that the leather is curved this way when I glue it in, but you want the head kind of pointing forward when it's resting. And then it's really important that you put some kind of bend in the wire. And so I like to put it right where the back sticks out. It makes it work a little bit better. And I'll show you in a minute here. Sorry, it's hard to show on the camera. So I'm putting a little bend in the wire. And then I want it to stand off of the back a little bit. And then I'll grab the wire right where the other hole is. And I do that because the holes are always a little bit different. This one I bend at basically a 90 and I cut off. So you end up with a shape like this. And then there's a couple of different ways to do this. I do this the quick way because I do so many of these that the other way just ends up taking me too long. This way I'm just gluing the wire in there. The way that these clips are shaped, they don't want to come out on their own, and so they just kind of stay put. But I'll show you real quick. What you can do is you can take a piece of wire. I'll use the scrap that I had here. You can take the piece of wire and you can bend the end over, just the very tip of the end, and you'll need some needle nose with the serrations on it, the grip on it, so this doesn't spin on you. But you want to pinch this shut on itself. Didn't bend it quite far enough. Hopefully this will make sense when I get it done here, because I'm not doing a good job of describing it. But if you pinch that shut, and hopefully this shows up on camera, so it folds back on itself, makes a loop. You can shove that in the hole with a little bit of glue and it'll lock in there so it can't possibly come back out. And I use this when I do like hook rings and stuff like that. I'll bend the end of the wire over, stick it in a hole that's the same size as the wire or a little bit smaller, so you have to shove it in, and this edge will be sharp and grab against the wood and it'll keep you from trying to pull it back out. But then I also add a little bit of glue to the hole to lock it in place. In this case, like I said, the C shape of the wire keeps it from coming out, so it doesn't want to come out of the holes. So I don't find that necessary on this one. And then I'll just put a little extra glue just to kind of lock this in place. Now what I'm trying to say with this little piece here is that if you have a little bit too much play, you'll notice that the wire is able to straighten out some. It also tends to conform to the back of the robot a little bit. Hopefully this is showing up on camera. But this little bend here is kind of important. If you have it perfectly straight, then you have to get your angles exactly right. And if you go too far, you'll either kink the head back and break it, or it won't go forward all the way. This one's a little crooked, but I think that adds a little character, so it's not a big deal. But yeah, this little bend right here gives the spring a little bit more distance to travel. Hopefully that helps. You'll have to experiment with where this hole needs to be drilled and where the robot needs to sit on the clothespin in order to get the right amount of action. And it depends on how long your neck is. This one's a little bit too long, which is part of the reason why it's looking weird. So if the leather's a little shorter, then the head tends to stay a little bit straighter. But all of them are the same basic idea. And that's it. That's how I make these little guys. And I make them a lot. Hopefully that helps.